Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Not Too Comic Book. This being a show, we talk about TV shows that are adaptations of comic books. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the latest episode of Cloak Dagger, as well as the latest episode of iZombie. Like always, if I'm talking about something you want to listen to, you can always look in the description down below. I include a time when I start talking about each of the respective shows. So, for example, if you want to hear what I say about this week's episode of Cloak Dagger, you can skip to what I say about this week's episode of iZombie. But the first thing I'm going to talk about is this week's episode of Cloak Dagger. A lot of interesting things. Well, for one, we find out that Leah's actually alive. That kind of surprised me just because I just assumed she was dead just because he literally tossed her on the road like she was nothing. But I guess for him, it's like he literally took all there was left, you know. It seems like obviously over the years he had already kind of stripped away a lot of her hopes and everything that was there. Or maybe, you know, I kind of probably, because she was probably someone he'd always kind of latched on to. Once again, and it's kind of that sad thing of like, I think, you know, there's some part of Leah that was aware of everything. So it's like, oh, good, he's doing this to other women, not doing it to me. That's why she was super scared for him to do it to her. But like, obviously it was like a Stockholm syndrome type of situation of like, it's like, no, he needs me, he loves me, he's the only person that cares about me. He kind of put her in that mindset, but just the sad thing is he almost tosses her down, around like she was trash. But like I said, like, you know, VIDS' aunt was dead, so I was like, that's why I was kind of like, oh, I just assumed Leah was in the same situation, but maybe it's a situation where he killed her because it's like, oh, she wouldn't play ball, she wouldn't tell him exactly what to do and stuff like that, so maybe that's the difference. Like, for him, it's like, oh, I took what I needed from her, I don't need her anymore, you know? And obviously, it puts a very interesting situation, because obviously, like, Ty and Tandy are going about things, trying to track down Andre from two different routes. You know, Ty wants to talk to, you know, Tandy about it, but she doesn't want to talk about it. Like, Tandy, you know, internalizes a lot of stuff, and she doesn't really want to share it to anybody, because I think for her, it's like, if she talks about it, it makes it that much more real, and it just, I guess she feels like if she talks about it, like, it makes her vulnerable. She feels like she won't be able to make a move when the time comes, so I think she ends up bottling all that up. That's how I see it, Tandy's kicking it with, you know, Mayhem, and, you know, and Mayhem ends up bringing something interesting where it's kind of like, oh, I wasn't expecting you to be kind of the killer type. And, you know, Tandy was like, I didn't expect that either. Because for her, it's like, she's in her mind thinking like, we're going to, you know, because even Ty was like, what do we do when we find Andre? She's like, that's a bridge that will come across when it becomes a bridge. And like, she's kind of set in her mind of like, she's going to kill Andre. Even to the point she's even considering to kill Leah until Mayhem stops her, because it's like, wait, we could use her for information. But when she goes inside of Leah, like, she's empty because he's taking everything from her. And, you know, Ty has to, you know, that situation kind of very similar to Ivan, where it's like there's a door there. So Ty has to open that first door, then they go a layer deeper into the second door that Tandy opens. But I really like, because obviously this episode bounced back and forth between present day and eight years ago, where we see kind of things slowly, you know, like I said, that's a conversation that's come up before of like, oh yeah, like he's had 8 years of doing this. He even brings it up. It's like, I've been dealing with my situation for like 8 years. You guys have only been dealing with this for 8 months. So who's to say your powers won't corrupt? I mean, to be fair, we've already seen it kind of happen where it's like, you know, even Ty kind of used his powers, you know, unintentionally, but when, you know, he used them on Delgado, and kind of brought his fears to the surface and stuff like that. And obviously Tandy was stealing hopes back in season 1, kind of, you know, in a very similar vein to what, you know, Andre is doing now. And that's why he was almost calling, you know, her out, because it's like, oh, you're a hypocrite. Like, I know you've used your powers to kind of make yourself feel better, so why shouldn't I be able to do the same? Because the sad thing is, we see, because it's like Leah was his nurse. She took care of him. But then the moment he found out about what he could do, it's like, oh, I need to keep you around, because I think, you know, prior to him setting up the group, because there was a couple months in between that, because it was like 92 months, it was like a little less than, like, 7.5 years ago, is like after, like, he tried to kill himself. Well, I'm all over the place, so I have to go, like, further back. We find out that basically he was trying to hit this blue note, and I guess maybe it did something in his brain. Maybe he had like an aneurysm or something, but whatever the case may be, when he tried to hit that note, it ended up like doing something, and it created the situation where he has these constant migraines. Maybe it's a condition he always had, and it took that moment of him pushing himself to hit that note that it manifested itself, or maybe it's just a condition that manifested because he tried to hit the note. Either way, you know, that's ultimately what made him try to kill himself, because for him, it's like music is all he had, is what he put his everything into. It was his first love, his first and only love. Well, not first love, but his only love. And without it, he felt like the world was kind of empty without it. So he tried to kill himself. And obviously, we know the night of the rig exploding, he gained powers from it. But what was it like? So it's like, what, 7 months later or whatever, he ended up starting that group. Like, because that was like around the time, like, after he had already, like, because that's why I'm kind of thinking, like, either he probably went through some physical therapy or whatever. We never really got a time frame at that moment, at, like, you know, in that first memory or whatever, where, you know, Leah's like, oh, but he's like, oh, but what about your dreams? You know, everything about, like, oh, you know, music was kind of your passion. That's not where your passion is really loud with this whole medicine thing. That's not really what you want. That's kind of what your parents, I need you, blah, 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 blah. So it's like, I think for a good chunk of time, he was feeding off solely Leah. So I think, even though we don't get that time frame, I think in that 7 or so months, he was constantly feeding off of her. And then he created this system of like, oh, now I can feed off other people. So that's why I'm kind of thinking, like, that's why Leah was super reluctant about him feeding off of her, you know, despair last episode. She was like, no, come over, find someone else. He's like, but this is what I need right now. And for her to be so, you know, in need of his approval and his love in a sick, twisted way, that she wanted to provide for him, because it's like, oh, he needs me, he loves me, he cares about me, when in actuality, you know, like I said, how he treated her, like, he used her up and then just tossed her away, just, you know. And it's interesting because I think, you know, it's that same situation, it's kind of building upon Tandy's thought process before, where she's like, oh, if you're in an abusive relationship, just leave. She didn't realize that Leah was a victim in all of this too, because for her, she was thinking like, oh, Leah was doing this voluntarily. But it's like, I figured as much that Andre had gotten inside of her head and put her in that position. And it took this episode for her to be like, oh, she's a victim too, because she looks at who she was. Like, Leah only had a smidge of her hopes left, and it was buried deep within herself, and that was her playing her violin and everything. That was like that last glimmer of hope for her. And, you know, and the sad thing is, I think Andre's power works in the sense that once he's touched you, he's always going to be connected to you, because the moment that glimmer of hope either sparked again inside of her, or because I think it was so abandoned, because it was something she had buried down so deep, of like her dreams and aspirations of like music being so important to her. She had buried it down so deep. The moment Tandy unlocked it, it unlocked for Andre. So it's like a thing of like, no matter how much time has passed, if new hopes or whatever, you know, that, you know, new opportunities for despair unlock for someone, he can automatically jump on it. It unlocks for him. It's kind of interesting how that kind of works. They kind of sadly opened a path for him. And because of that, like, he can actually jump into side of people's memories and stuff too, because it's like, oh, this is inside of Leah's head, so you can't actually hurt me. And that's kind of like the crazy thing about his power, even without even physically being there, because at least Tandy and Ty's case, they have to touch him. But I guess it's like, once he's touched you, once he's kind of absorbed your pain and stuff like that, your despair, he's forever linked to you, so he can pop in whenever he wants to. It kind of shows you how scary his power is. But for him, the whole thing is, like I said, about becoming a god. He wants to get rid of his pain, and he needs an audience for it, because he plans to absorb all of their despair and rise up and become a god. That's what this is all about for him. Then, like, there's two different, like, obviously the story kind of goes in two different directions in certain regards, because obviously, like, there's everything between Tandy and Mayhem. I think because Tandy understands, you know, the whole gray area, whereas, like, Mayhem is very black and white, and that things are the way they are. It's like, yeah, maybe some terrible shit happened to Connors or Andre or Leah, but the fact is, it doesn't take away from the fact is they did terrible things. It doesn't just, which is almost interesting, because it's almost like, well, what gives you the right to, you know, be the hammer of justice in this whole situation, you know, the executioner. But, you know, you have Tandy kind of protecting Leah, and, you know, you have Mayhem being like, whatever she does, that's on you, which begs the question, that must mean that Leah is going to potentially do something in the future. It seems like that might be foreshadowing her doing something, and then it being Tandy's responsibility, because, like, she's the one that spared her life. It's like, because, like, what Andre did to her, he damaged her heavily, and we don't know if that's something, even given time and therapy and stuff like that, is that going to be something she could potentially recover from? Like, it makes you wonder, if Andre dies, that everything he took from everyone, all that pain he put on people, is it removed? Are their hopes and kind of, you know, that's despair removed from them? That emptiness is filled with their hopes and aspirations, their dreams and everything about them. Like, do they get that back if Andre dies? Because I doubt he'd ever willingly give it back, but it might be a situation of once it's gone forever. It's kind of interesting, because it kind of ties into, well, Ty's story, where it's kind of like, you can't always fix things. Some things are broken, and there's no kind of fixing it, and it makes me wonder if that kind of apply in this case as well. But when it comes to Andre's side of no, I'm not Andre, Ty's side of things. He's talking to his mom, and his mom kind of lies to him about the whole, like, I was like, oh, she's lying about Connors. Sadly for her, Ty pops in, without her knowing the benefit of his power. He could just pop in like that, and it's like, oh, he sees a bloody newspaper, he realizes what she's done, the fact that she's lying about it. And for him, it's like, I think for him, it's like, I understand why you did it. Like, it still kind of goes, it's rough to know that she did that, but he understands why. It's like, she did it for Billy, she did it for my sake too, and it's like, but I don't think it makes it any easier. Yes, Connors did some shitty stuff, but I think as also the fact is that you still killed someone, and I think that's going to be something that his mom's going to have to live with. And the fact is, she's going to have to handle that on her own, because I doubt Ty's going to tell, because if he tells her, like, she might fall apart. I mean, keeping it to herself, she might fall apart. I mean, to be fair, she told Delgado, but beyond that, like, it's going to be interesting to see, like, what ends up happening in that regard. But Ty ends up meeting with the dude he had saved before, the dude who had helped save his mom a couple episodes back. I like that he's reading a newspaper. It's like, yo, it's about Luke Cage. I was like, wait, what? I was like, what? And it's like, oh yeah, this was written by Karen Page. I'm like, yes, the references. I like that. I don't know why. It's just like, it gets me giddy. Like, I don't know, like, even more like, I love the connectivity of this Marvel Cinematic Universe. Once again, it's the whole conversation. I know the TV shows and movies are disconnected, but I still like the winks and the nods that it can give stuff in the TV shows, especially this kind of referencing that stuff. Like I said, sadly it's canceled and all that, but it's still kind of nice to kind of get those references kind of plugged in there. So I thought that was kind of pretty dope. But I do like what Ty's trying to do, that basically he's trying to get the different gangs to help him find Andre. And I like what he does, like basically just like popping in, pop, getting people, teleporting them away. It's kind of interesting because he's almost like New Orleans' own boogeyman in a certain sense. Sad thing is, I think if anyone's more the boogeyman in this situation, it's Andre. But obviously under the circumstances, you can kind of see where Ty kind of plays in that role too. But like him just like popping all over the place with the two leaders of the gang, like pushing one off the roof, popping, getting him, popping him back and everything. And I love that discussion because it's like, oh, here you are trying to play hero and stuff like that. It's like, but the fact is, this is kind of like, oh, you want us to stop all this. For him, it's like, I can't stop everyone that uses drugs, but what I can do is I can stop you guys from making a profit off of it, putting people in a position that they don't want to be, using drugs to force people into a position that they don't want to be in. Because I like that aspect, because it's like, yeah, I'm one person, I can do this and that, but I'm not going to stop every little crime, but I'm still going to try, because it's like, because for Ty, he's like, I'm done trying to be expecting me, you, or the city to be perfect, but it doesn't mean I'm gonna stop fighting for it. I love that, because it's recognizing that, yeah, there's limits to what you can do, but it doesn't mean you have to sit back and do nothing. You might slip up, you might mess up, you might not be perfect hero, but it doesn't mean you still shouldn't try. And I like that aspect, And he's convincing, like I said, like, it's like, yeah, this ain't no negotiation, and just him scaring them by popping them in and popping them out. It's just, I love, like, how scary Ty's power can be when the time comes. It's like, yeah, it can very, like, easily motivate people, And even a conversation about, okay, so when it's all said and done, like, for one, Tandy does save Lisa in a sense, Leah, by dropping her off at the hospital, but when the time comes, it's like, okay, so how are we going to handle Andre? We're going to handle him together, because, like, for Tandy, it's like, I'm the one with the daggers, the knives of light, I should be the one to do it, but Ty's like, no, you don't have to do this alone. If it does come down to the whole thing of, like, we have to kill him because we can't let him rise to godhood because, he become too powerful, too much out of their control, so we need to stop that from happening. So if it comes down to it, we do it together. And I think that's such a fascinating thing, because it's always that struggle for hero of, like, what do you do? Because he's not the type of villain that you could just let him be, because even in prison, he'd still be able to do what he wants to kind of get his way. So it's like, that's the only way they kind of see of kind of ending this potentially, so I think it's just something fascinating that and it's always a sad thing of, like, a hero has to struggle with that decision, like, do I put this bad guy down? Because if I don't, like, there's no true prison for them, so it's going to be interesting to see, obviously they come here with their mindset on it. But what's interesting is, because obviously, like, Mayhem had brought it up early in the episode, like, there's the ladies that were still locked up and everything, who kind of were going a little mad, I think, because of just the condition that Andre left them in. But then the other ladies who were kind of released, they up and disappeared, but now we kind of see where they went. It seems like that's the whole point of this blue note. It's supposed to be a way to kind of enthrall people. It's his way to unlocking his godhood. Like, it kind of all comes full circle. The note he was trying to hit that started all of this, his condition with the migraines, is the melody and thing that he needs to hit to unlock his godhood, you know? So that's interesting. Sadly, you know, Tandy sees Michaela there. She also sees her mom, hence why she hasn't been able to get in contact with her mom. That explains more so why everything went down, like obviously the beers and the pills and stuff like that. That wasn't just because of Tandy saying what she did, partially, but that's also because it was most likely, you know, Andre pushing and manipulating her pain, you know, that being like something that he could feed on, of like, oh, probably her pain when it comes to Tandy, like feeling a certain way, you know, probably her own insecurities and doubts and pain about everything going down between her and Nathan. So, you know, it's sad too, because considering the fact is, like, you know, especially because Tandy tried to apologize, but, you know, it's like, would it have made a difference had she gotten to her sooner? I don't know, you know, it makes you wonder how this whole situation would have played out. But when the time came, they did kind of work together to potentially put him down. It's like she throws a dagger, he, you know, grabs it through his like darkness and then teleports it, and it flings and stabs Andre. That way it's not just on Tandy, it's like that way it's on both of them, but it doesn't seem like they stopped it and everyone disappears. Now that's the thing I'm curious about. Is it a situation of everyone disappeared because they weren't technically really there, it was just kind of a manifestation of the pain? Is the fact of the matter is, are they gone because Andre pulled them into his world, into his god of like, where they sacrificed, where they kind of like raptured to open the pathway to his god? Because obviously he steps through, there's this bright light, it's almost like an audience, so were they brought into his world to be his forever audience that he draws upon their pain and stuff like that, with they are forever used to charge his godhood or something like that? So like, are they locked in that room forever cheering his performance and he's feeding off of that continuously? Is that kind of the price to pay for his godhood? And then they start hearing the music, and so I'm like, so is that supposed to represent the fact is his music is going to sweep across New Orleans and he feeds off of everyone's pain, becoming stronger and stronger? I don't know. It's definitely going to be interesting to see how this whole situation plays out. Like I said, it's like, because also like everything going on with Mayhem, I thought she'd be like the main antagonist, but then there's everything with Andre, and I think that's going to be a path that ends up crossing the next episode, because the next episode is the season finale, so I'm curious to see how they end up wrapping this up. Like, I don't know, it's that situation you almost like don't see a happy ending with like everything that everyone's going through. Maybe, like I said, there'll be a silver lining of like, okay, slowly but surely everyone's going to piece themselves back together. But that also comes down to, like I said, depending on maybe if Andre gets killed, does that spare everyone, or does it mean that the moment Andre dies, like everything he took from people can never be gotten back, you know? So maybe that's a situation where Ty and Tandy have to kind of cut those ties, and then maybe you'll have like, at the same time that's happening, Mayhem is threatening to kill him the moment she does. I mean, will she even be able to, him being kind of as powerful as he is, kind of enthralling so many people and feeding off so much despair at once, could potentially make him unstoppable. I mean, to be fair, he has a lot that he could use to cripple people, because, like, you know, he's touched Tandy, he's touched Ty, so he can pull into their pain and draw upon it at any point in time, so especially no telling what his powers are going to be like. But like Evita's aunt had said, like, what are you going to be? What kind of god are you going to be when you're no longer, you know, playing? Like, what's that's going to be like for him? Like, I figure there's going to be ramifications for him doing all this. And I'm so curious to see how everything ends up ultimately playing out in the season finale. And now moving on to this week's episode of iZombie. A lot of interesting things went down in this episode, so let's break it down. There's this whole situation of like this genius dude who had this, you know, Piercy company and everything, and he ended up getting murdered. It's kind of interesting. I really love the fact is that Clive was kind of disgusted when Liv was eating his brain, because she's like, what? You see me eat plenty of brains. He's like, yeah, but it's the whole kombucha situation. Ew. That's what really disturbed him about it. Like, obviously, he, you know, because I'm about to say, yeah, you've known for a while and you've seen her eat brains, but it's like, ew, kombucha? I'm fine with the brains, but ugh. And she just kind of shrugs her shoulders. And obviously, he's like, you know, let me know if you're going to have any, you know, outburst type of situation. And she's like, but, you know, is the mind really in control of itself? And he's like, so this is how it's going to be like going forward with this case. I see. I love that it's just kind of like, yeah, he's trying to be like, let me know ahead of time before you kind of, you know, the brain kind of sucks you in. You know, I think that, you know, that's what Clive is trying to get at and stuff like that. I love that. It is kind of interesting, just like the pontificating that she does, you know, while on his brain and everything. I mean, the dude was kind of a genius, and he had his way of handling things and kind of thinking of things. I even love when they're interviewing Melissa, whatever, and she just walks up to the board during the interrogation, you know, asking questions, and just goes, ideas on the board. And it's like, oh, because like Melissa's very pragmatic about the whole situation. It's like this and this, I have an alibi, this and that, we broke up, but here everything between us was good and stuff like that. So that was interesting. Side note, I forgot the actual term that they use, but she's essentially his personal assistant, Nora. It kept bugging me the entire episode. I'm like, why do I recognize that actress? I think she's in the TV show Continuum. I think that's what I remember from. It's been a long time since I've seen the show, but I think that's what I remember her from. I felt like there was something else too, but I'm blanking on it. Something I'll have to look up on my own later, but it just kept bugging me. I was like, she looks so familiar. But nevertheless, it's an interesting situation because basically he's a smart dude that was like, oh, some apocalypse level event is going to come, and basically he wants to get, like, you know, humanity, people that could survive like a certain amount of time inside of the bunker, 20 or so people. Turns out Peyton's on the list, and I love Robbie being like, oh no, I'm going to be glad, you know, knowing that you're safe inside that bunker while I'm fighting off motorcycle cannibals. It's like Peyton's like, I didn't even know. It turns out he actually had Nora on the list, but then she got pulled off the list because he saw Peyton and kind of saw, you know, a lot of qualities about it, but also like the attractive quality of like who she is and just everything about her, like, you know, obviously the role she's kind of been playing going forward, like being a very high figure in just this whole Seattle situation. So it just kind of shows you what kind of person he was, and the fact that he was willing to, you know, it's just kind of like, oh, like he was so pragmatic about things and stuff like that. It's like this, you know, and that actually plays a big role in the case because obviously everything's connected to this dude named Sheldon who. Now, that was kind of almost surprising when it turned out. It's like, oh yeah, Sheldon super hates zombies. He was just like, oh, I can't wait. Your kind is going to get wiped out, monsters. I'm going to dance on your ashes. I'm like, Jesus. Even Clive was like, holy shit, he really hates zombies. And that was kind of interesting. I mean, like, we've seen people, like, have vitriol to, like, zombies before. To that extreme, that's, like, the most hateful person we've seen towards zombies in the show. At least to my personal opinion. I mean, obviously, like, the Dead Enders, obviously, kind of, but, like, the Dead Enders have never been that vocal about it. That's what's interesting, but nevertheless, it seems like he is the one behind all this, but, you know, when it's all, because it turns out, like, the dude that got killed, he was, you know, selling people's data to this guy, and this guy was kind of tracking, like, because it all ties together, because obviously, like, there's a whole situation of, like, oh yeah, like, the Dead Enders are out in front of, like, places, you know, related to zombies, whether it be, like, a situation of, like, oh, here are dispensaries, or just zombie-friendly places in general, taking pictures of them, trying to collect their data, find out where they live and stuff like that, trying to get a full-on count and location of all the zombies in Seattle. And it seems like that storyline heavily ties into this murder in particular, because it turns out the lady that was behind this is the new CEO, current running CEO for now, was Melissa, because she killed him because it's like he was so caught up in his own things, he never thought about the ramifications. Like, oh, you're selling zombies data to a man who hates zombies, who would gather up a rally of people to kill a group of people. And it's like, but he was so caught up in his own thought, like, oh, I need money for my arc. He didn't care about anything else. He was so focused on saving humanity, it didn't once cross his mind to worry about saving zombies. And that's kind of a big part that's going to be definitely playing a big role kind of going forward into in this season. It's like, oh yeah, like, zombies are a species that potentially can be wiped out, you know, if enough fear sparks enough humans to kind of gather up and do it. And obviously that seems like that's kind of heading this direction. And that's why Melissa did, because obviously it's that situation of Liv didn't want to, like, let the situation play out the way it does at the end of, like, because Melissa's like, I wasn't going to lose any sleep for him going to jail for a murder he didn't commit, because he's a terrible person. He was going to mass murder a whole bunch of zombies he would have been responsible for. But she's like, well, why did you, like, out of anybody, Renegade, I figured you would understand, so why would you lose any sleep over? Which Liv wouldn't, but for her, it's like the law, like, he's not the killer, so he shouldn't go to jail for it. But she was kind of being like, we should, but, you know, Clive was like, we can't go with this whole precog thing. Like, if he didn't commit a crime, like, legally, they're, you know, they have to let him go. like he wasn't the one responsible for this, but it's like we see how much vitriol he spews about zombies and just how deep his hate goes, and seeing him, even if things kind of get settled from the situation, that doesn't mean he's not going to find another outlet to still try and hurt zombies. It's like, he seems like that type of, Sheldon seems like that type of dude of like, you're not going to change his mind on this. He's going to be one of those dudes that's set in his ways. Maybe I'm wrong, but the fact is going to this extreme, wanting to potentially, you know, and you understand why Melissa did what she did, because it's like, once again, it's a whole situation of like, what the number that was given to that, Major gave like a couple episodes ago, 1 or 2 episodes ago, was like when he like there's only 10,000 zombies in Seattle, so that's a very small number to like the 500,000 I think he was saying that lives in Seattle. So it's all, like I said, you understand, it doesn't justify it, but you understand why she did what she did, because she felt like he's so focused on his big picture, he's not willing to see the consequences of what he was doing, you know. So it's definitely going to be interesting to see where that goes, especially because Liv has that responsibility as Renegade. She's trying to save zombie lives. Like for her, it's she's trying to help everyone. That's her thing, you know. She never just tries to help specifically zombies, but now she's in that position of like, I think it's going, like when this whole situation plays out, Liv is probably ultimately going to have to choose a side. Like, she probably won't be able to work in the middle anymore. Like, there's going to be things that force her hands to be 100% zombie, you know? But I think she's still going to try and work that middle ground, because obviously people she cares about are human. There are people she cares about that are zombies, you know? So she's trying to bridge that gap. She's trying to find peace between both worlds, you know? So it's going to be interesting to see that play out over the course of the season and everything like that, especially with the new development of like, oh, obviously like her operation, you know, her hideout has kind of become like a little safe haven for like, you know, zombie kids and stuff like that, almost borderlining kind of as an orphanage to a certain extent, even to the point it's like, oh, we're hiring a teacher that got fired for being a zombie. It's like, hey, here, these kids are here, so why not, you know, let them get an education and stuff like that, you know? So I thought that was pretty dope. But the moment, like, Major made the point of, like, yeah, try not to say anything, because this is, you know, Renegade's operation, and things could kind of be bad if things kind of get exposed. Like, the moment that was kind of happening, and the moment those came out, words came out Major's mouth, I'm like, that's heavily like, foreshadowing that something's going to happen. I was like, someone's going to capture him, like a dead end or something's going to pump him for information. Not necessarily the route it went, but I'll kind of get to that in a second. It's that whole situation, too, of, like, I keep bringing it up, the whole thing of, like, Liv being a celebrity, like, you know, in this case, Sheldon's like, oh, I know who you are, Renegade. And obviously not everyone knows, or maybe just people will hear the name Renegade, you know, because it's not like Nora knew, because there's that whole excuse that Clive made. She was like, Renegade, like, you know, Liv was kind of like, oh, we know that Peyton's name was Cornelius. It's like, how do you know? And Clive's like, we have new forensic stuff that lets them dust boards. I'm like, nice way to just, I love that you pull that right out of your ass, dude. That was incredible. But it's interesting, you know, that whole level of celebrity. Like, she's the biggest target, because, you know, everyone in Seattle knows she's a zombie, so it puts her in a very compromising position, especially with everything that kind of goes on. And I guess I can kind of like circle around to that aspect to everything, because it turns out that there's another group, like the 2 guys that shot up the warm bodies, they get pulled out of Frost by someone else. Like, I'm always blanking on that dude's name. I was actually surprised, because I was thinking like, oh, like when he was like, oh, meet the new boss, I was like, okay, it's going to end up being Blaine's dad or something like that. It's like, no, turns out it's not, because that was always my thought, that Blaine's dad was still alive. Even like, I thought like that whole situation was fake. Maybe not. It seems like it's straight up no, he's still alive, but nevertheless, I mean, that he's really dead, but nevertheless, it seems like this new guy, which is also interesting too, based on those containers and stuff like that, it looked like he was sniffing Utopium, which is like, well, at one point we see him just kind of crush the head of another zombie, so I'm like, so I'm assuming, that's never come up before, like, zombies doing Utopium? I mean, I guess to a certain extent it has been, but never in its purest form, because, like, there was a whole Max Rager thing, like, obviously it kind of gets you, like, oh, it's almost like PCP to zombies and stuff like that, you know. So I almost let that slip my mind, because remember, Liv and Justin were kind of doing that, like, back in season 3, like, you saw them do that kind of, so it comes up a little bit, because didn't Major do that at one point in time, start doing some doing that too. Like, but it was kind of performance enhancement when it comes to the whole, zombie situation. So that's kind of interesting. So, but it seems like instead of just doing that, he's just straight up doing Utopian, which I guess like maybe it's at its purest form. It almost seems like he's addicted to it. But it almost seems because like we've never seen that circle back around necessarily since then. But to see him kind of like all like raged out like that, I think that's definitely going to be interesting. Like, I'm curious, is he going to get more zombies to do that, or is he the only one? Like, maybe he's gotten so addicted to it he needs his fix. But yeah. It seems like, once again, we've met the Dead Enders, who are obviously the more radical side of humans. Now we're kind of meeting the more radical side of the whole zombie situation. So now that's very interesting. That one dude wanted to back out, but ended up getting killed because it's kind of like you're all in or not in this type of situation. And we see Moss get, Mr. Moss, the teacher, get kidnapped by this dude, and it's like, oh, you work for us now, because they were threatening, his significant other, and it's like, okay. Now I don't know specifically what they want. I'm assuming it's like they want an insight to Liv's operation, because she's connected to all these different zombies and stuff like that. So I'm guessing it's like, oh, we want an insight to her operation so we can know who are zombies, so that they have a place to kind of like either they're going to try and infiltrate her group to try and radicalize a lot of people within her group, maybe even try to radicalize Liv, but I highly doubt that, because why not go to her directly? Is because they know she's not willing to go that far when it comes to humans. It's because, once again, like, she represents that balance of like the zombie world and the human world. She has people on both sides of the whole situation, so she won't be as radical as they probably would want her to be. So I think it's going to be a thing of like slowly but surely, like, oh, anytime there's new zombies brought in this situation that are connected to Renegade, send them our way. We're going to amass our army. And so it's like the Dead Enders are amassing theirs, while we see the opposite happening with the zombies as well. So I think that's potentially where we're going to see that storyline go. And obviously that whole thing is happening under Liv's nose, not even knowing, what's going on there. So we'll see. I figured it might start with the children first, just because it's like, it might be kind of that sad situation of potentially, child soldiers. It's like, oh, you're zombies, so you're part of this fight type of situation, which we know that they're not as anti-human as the radical group is. Like, even, we saw at the end of last episode, Jordan's brother's like opinions on humans kind of shifted. Just because of the whole Baron being a good human helping out with this whole operation thing. So we'll definitely see how that whole situation ultimately ends up playing out. But that's where my mindset is on with that whole situation. Another interesting thing that went down this episode, I love the whole like Jimmy situation with like iZombie and everything like that. They're kind of doing like some trial runs and stuff like that. Obviously not to Peyton's liking, because it's like, oh yeah, you like have like, oh, the neighbor Ed coming in, oh, the team lost, smashing microwave, being a scary zombie and stuff like that. And obviously he didn't take well to Ravi giving him notes and stuff like that. But I love, it's like, one comedy person to another comedy person. I love him kind of explaining it like that. But nevertheless, obviously he didn't like the way Peyton was kind of, because for him, I think it's that thing of like, oh, you're creative and stuff like that, so you don't like being like, oh, your vision kind of being stepped on by other people. But for Peyton, it's like, maybe we should go at this a different perspective, because we don't want zombies to look scary and be like, we want to kind of send a message of like, zombies aren't like rage-induced killing machines or something like that, And it took like one of the people that's part of the troop, Yasmin, to be like, oh, what if we flip the script? Instead of making these jokes be done by the zombies, what if we would make it so that it's the humans saying it, and it's going to be that stereotypical thing of like, oh, it's that supposed to be kind of like that heartwarming comedy in the sense of like, oh, here are these ignorant humans making these stereotypes or believing these stereotypes that kind of apply. They're like, oh, this applies to all zombies, but then it's like, oh yeah, the zombies are showing them like, no, we're not like that. So it's and obviously, Yasmin gets promoted to head writer. Jimmy didn't like that, so him and the troop leave. But ultimately, in the end, he does come back because he sees what Yasmin and Peyton does. Because it's like, my humor is my thing, so I know it's not for everyone. Like, I'm not really that touchy-feely type of stuff. But he realizes what Peyton's doing and, obviously how important this is. So it's like, yeah, I'm going to make sure that the work gets done right. So circle back around like that. I thought that was kind of neat. And I'm very interested to see this whole iZombie situation. I've already kind of brought it up before, how I think that whole situation might play out, and, the potential shift of the show's title going from iZombie to iZombie. Like, I have already talked about that previously, but we'll see if that ends up being the case or not. But another element to this episode was everything dealing with Blaine. I thought that was interesting. Like, basically someone's writing an article a journalist is kind of like following him around, kind of to getting to know him. She does bring up the whole aspect of like, oh yeah, there's a lot of like, Blaine's shady past. It's like, because I think there are some people who might kind of forget, oh yeah, Blaine has always been kind of a murdering psychopath, but the fact of the matter is, I think a lot of that's never really stuck. Like, there's probably rumors, and there's this and that, but nothing's like 100% concrete, so there's that whole situation. But it is interesting because he's trying to, impress Alice, and, yeah, I even love him at one point whispering to Donnie as like set up that whole party situation because he had made it be like, oh yeah, come over to this shindig. It won't just be us at my place. I got a whole party raving and stuff like that. It's like, yeah, set it up ahead of time. I like that. And Donnie being best wingman ever, is like, got your back, bro. But I really like that whole situation of like handling the dead enders. Having Blaine go, number 6, and he's got like Pablo and the boys playing a tune while he does his thing of like, I don't think I ever knew that fighting style's name, Capoeira. I'm sure I'm butchering that. Because my mind immediately, the moment he started fighting, I was like, oh, Eddie Gordo? It seemed like Blaine's, got his, Eddie Gordo situation going on, which I make that reference lightly because I'm not that well versed in Tekken, but I know enough to be like, yo, those some Eddie Gordo moves. So, I like that Blaine had to show off like that. It's actually interesting. Like, it's like, oh, potential. It didn't even cross my mind until afterwards. But it's like, oh yeah, last time Blaine was in a relationship, it was everything with Peyton, and that was a whole complicated situation all in itself. So, that is until she found out he was a bold-faced liar and everything like that. But still, nevertheless. So obviously, it's like, oh, him trying to swoon, Alice and everything until she finds out, oh wait, there's definitely more to this situation. She's getting all cuddly with Blaine, and she finds the mask, and because she sees the mask and realizes like, oh, he's the one that killed Bacchus and set up that whole like trying to sell the cure, obviously last season and everything. And it's like, oh, okay, so that's interesting. Now, obviously, she's going to play coy to get close to him because it's like, oh, there's a juicy story here. I'm about to kind of unravel this, So that's definitely going to be interesting. Where Blaine's like, oh, probably thinking there's a deeper connection there. It's like she's just using you because she knows the truth about you. That in itself might have a sad twist. I wonder if she's going to ultimately be Blaine's undoing. Because, like, that's been a thing of, like, Blaine's just constantly gotten away with what he's done. But to be fair, it's in that crazy situation because obviously, like, Blaine's kind of an important role in all of this, too. Just because he's the supplier of, like, he helps kind of supply with the brains and stuff like that. So it's going to be interesting if he gets taken down, what that situation necessarily means. Not unless it's going to be a thing of like, oh yeah, Donnie takes over the operation or someone else does. Not unless you end up being a situation where it's like ultimately Liv is the one that ends up taking over that operation. Just everything zombie related and kind of ends up falling in Liv's lap. Maybe, I don't know. To be fair, Alice is a zombie too, so I don't know. Like, obviously, her seeking the truth is kind of, there's a story there that needs to be told. So obviously I think that comes first, but still it's definitely going to be interesting to see where that all ends up taking us going forward into the next episode. But really, that's all I want to talk about. Till the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest and enjoy it. Good day and good